Hey guys, I'm Fainer. Welcome back to the channel. So I set a goal for myself that I was going to listen to every metal album released from January 1st to January 29th worldwide. The hard part about this isn't even the listening part, it's just insanely hard to track down every metal album that gets released. I've been making web scrapers that comb databases and blogs and stuff for new releases for quite a while now, and I've kind of just realized it's not possible to track down absolutely every album because a lot of albums simply don't want to be found. There are a lot of albums that just get released on like Chinese blogs that are unindexed by Google, and like some of the black metal community is still doing cassette-only releases. And also even some of the stuff that makes it on the Spotify just has like 2 monthly listeners, and the only way you'd even know that it's metal is if you somehow found it and listened to it. So honestly, I just gave up on like the super insanely underground stuff because like, dude, if you just drop a cassette in the middle of the forest, that's not an album release. Regardless, I reframed my goal to be to listen to every metal album I could find, which turns out to have been 312 albums. That's also excluding remasters, EPs, and live albums. Like, in order to count, it had to be a real album, brand new metal, studio LP. Now, I know some of you are doing mental math to try to figure out just how much time I spent listening to metal in the last month, and it's a bit less than you'd think, because I did this with the purpose of finding the most interesting and best metal out there. So pretty much as soon as I realized an album was not very appealing, I just stopped listening to it and moved on to the next one. I listened to at least a few minutes of every album, and I listened to about 80 to 100 albums all the way through. And also, in addition to this challenge, I just did my normal monthly listening to non-metal stuff. So I'll have a video out about my favorite non-metal albums from January as well. And yeah, so kind of on to the bulk of the video now. I'm hoping to go over my top 25 albums I discovered from this endeavor. And there is some really strange and really underground stuff, so I guarantee no matter how hardcore a metal fan you are, there's some stuff that you haven't heard about on this list. Also, because I have a pretty large sample size, I'm hoping this constitutes the bar for right about what the top 10% of metal is. So, you know. Though there is one last caveat, I did discriminate pretty heavily against YouTube and Bandcamp only releases for this list because I want you guys to be able to easily listen to these albums. Now, for your convenience, I've put my favorite track from each album in a Spotify playlist in the description, and there's also a second Spotify playlist, which is every single metal album I could find that released on Spotify this month. And I'm fully aware half of you are about to leave and go look at the playlists, but if you could hit the like button on your way out, that would be cool. But hey, I'd like to go through the albums because some of them really benefit from having a little context to go along with them or have their genre explained. And I'm going to go really fast at first and then spend some more time on the ones that are particularly special. So starting out, we have a popular one, Therian, Leviathan, symphonic metal. Therian returns a little bit to like their mid-2000s kind of sound. Overall, it's a solid release, but it's not their best. 24th, we have Kilsen with Gravity Empires. This is some butt rock nu metal that's heavily ripping off bands like Godsmack and Seether. But you know, if you're okay with that and you can accept it for what it is, it's quite a bit of fun, and also it's got enough yarling to tide you over for quite some time to come. 23rd, we have Islet with The Devil Shining Out Your Eyes. This is some metallic hardcore that maintains a strong emphasis on mid-tempo grooves, and if you like this one, you should also check out December's album of the month, which is False Flowers by City of Industry. I'm also wearing the t-shirt. I like that album. 22, we have Dragony with Viribus Unitus. This is your monthly dose of good old cheesy power fantasy metal. It's nothing revolutionary, but it's certainly one that fans of the genre shouldn't miss. 21, we have Higgs Boson with the Anthill Chronicles. This is some grindcore with a hefty punk edge, similar to like really old school Napalm Death. There's a heavy emphasis on groovy riffs on here. And they also have great pacing, don't just kill you with blinding speed. At 26 minutes, it feels like a really fleshed out experience that doesn't overstay its welcome. 20, we have Asphyx with Necroceros. This is big, beefy death doom with amazing guitar tones. They're going to hook you within the first 5 seconds of this album with just an amazing opening riff. The vocals are also really interesting to me. It has a little bit of that hardcore lean where it's higher in the register and kind of feels to me like the vocalist is always out of breath. Asphyx are, of course, veterans of the scene, and they are still out here making great music. 19, we have Tarhag with Bestial. This is some stoner doom metal with great fuzzy, heavy guitar tones and harsh vocals. It's really better than it has any right to be. I found this to just be a fantastic little head nodder the whole way through. 18, we have Stormseeker with Guns Don't Cry. It's pirate metal. It has maybe a bit more of a folk lean than some of its peers, but it's still a bunch of silly drinking music and sea shanties. 17, we have Frozen Soul with Crypt of Ice. This is cavernous death metal. It shoots some awesome middle ground between the groove of Undeath and the cavernous atmosphere of Temple Nightside. And while it's occasionally not good at either of those things, when it's firing on all cylinders, it's amazing. 16, Jason Bieler and the Baron von Bielski Orchestra with Songs for the Apocalypse. This is some very Devin Townsend-y prog metal, which actually features Devin Townsend on a track. Definitely suffers from a bit of bloat and self-indulgence, but, you know, you'd be disappointed if you didn't get that in this genre. 15, we have Band Maid with Unseen World, and this is some poppy, kawaii metal for fans of baby metal. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to discriminate. This stuff can be a lot of fun and very accessible. 14, we have Sewn with Imperial. This is some very pop-friendly prog metal. They actually brought in the well-known producer Kane Churko for this one. He's best known for his work with Five Finger Death Punch, and you can definitely tell it shows up in the production. It's a very radio-friendly sound. 13, we have Demoniac with So It Goes. It's a thrash album, but I don't know, it's a touch blackened, and then also it's very progressive. It feels to me like they're trying to sort of push the limits of what thrash is allowed to be. For example, the last track is 20 minutes long, just to give you sort of an indicator of what I'm thinking here. 12, Owl Owl. I'm going to call it Funeral Doom, even though it does have some up-tempo bits, because I think you should go into it with a Funeral Doom mindset. The atmosphere and cavernous sonics of this is what really hooked me. It kind of feels at times like you're lost in underground service tunnels or something. 11, we have Cold Hate with O2 Beatdown, and this is, as you'd expect, some hardcore beatdown. It's these guys' debut album, and it's already very clear they know how to make some insanely heavy and pummeling music. And while the album is rather unpolished, especially in the production, I feel like that adds a layer of authenticity here. In 10th, we have Moribund Oblivion with these 4 albums. So Moribund Oblivion released 2 albums this month, and then their lead vocalist released 2 albums on his solo project. So they're all pretty good. Machine Brain is my favorite, and so that's the official pick. But this is Turkish black metal, so Turkish black metal is kind of its own little interesting corner of black metal. If that's been off your radar, you should definitely check it out. 9, we have Tribulation with Where the Gloom Becomes Sound. All the metal YouTubers have been talking about what a great album this is, and I'm not going to disagree. I think this is as close to a consensus album of the month as you're going to get out of the YouTube metal community. It really is just an album that takes a whole lot of genres and blends them into one really nifty concoction. The only thing I'll say is that it lacked the magic factor for me, and that's why it's not higher, but I won't deny it's a great album. 8, we have Isatha with From Here to Beyond. This is some hella underground folk metal with a basis in melodeath. I love how they create counterpoint melodies between the harsh vocals, female cleans, and woodwinds. It feels to me like if you aimed somewhere between Elovite and Leshak. 7, we have Werewolves with What a Time to Be Alive, and this is grindy death metal. The production here is fantastic. I love just how punchy everything feels. And, you know, it's just the fastest, most aggressive, hateful type of death metal. Now, I will say that I find this to be aggressive to the point of being fatiguing, but it's great to just listen to a couple songs when you want like the highest energy metal there is. 6, we have Eximperius with Sorartu. So I listened to an absolute graveyard's worth of death metal this month, and I think I'm going with this one as my top pick, but it's also because I'm a bit of a weirdo. To me, the best death metal balances groove, atmosphere, and pacing, and while it's not that hard to get any one of those correct, it's hard to get all 3 correct at once. This album has some fantastic mid-tempo headbanging riffs and a lot of breaks, which it uses to create an atmosphere that I've never quite heard done before. It's this dusty, barren, gross, carnage desert feeling. The closest comparison I can kind of come up with for it is that it feels to me a lot like Silithus from World of Warcraft. You can also get a little bit of what they're going for from the album cover. A lot of their sound has a very Middle Eastern feel to it, and I get the impression that this is what Nile would sound like if they were getting started nowadays. Another bonus point is that the album like starts in the same way it ends, so it seems to me like it was designed to be looped. So anyway, I've been having a lot of fun looping it, and sort of as a last point, their 2016 album is even better than this. 5, we have Portrayal of Guilt with We Are Always Alone, and this is one of those kind of albums you just gotta hear. If we're putting genre tags on it, it's in that like post-hardcore adjacent black metal scene that like Respire is in, but really it's just a heaping dose of everything that's great about extreme music. It's definitely not a headbanging album though, you're mostly just gonna be like fighting for your life on this one. 4th, we have The Body with I've Seen All I Need to See. This is some very experimental doom drone stuff, and you definitely need to bring your avant-garde attitude to this one. But the sonics on this are utterly incredible. Like some of the things these tracks manage to coerce your speakers into doing is it's just nuts. They like make entire songs out of just pure feedback, and then they'll like throw a whacked out organic drum kit behind it, and it morphs into like an actual real doom metal song. The closest comparison here is definitely Sun, but I honestly think I enjoy this more than I've ever enjoyed a Sun album. 3rd, we have Magdalene with M. So there was a lot of really great black metal this month, and this is my pick. And also, it's like the metal hard drugs though. This album has one of the absolute harshest masters I've ever heard on it. And it's not raw black metal, like it was intentionally mastered to kill your ears. And that's going to put off everyone except like the most hardened black metal listeners. But that's just the surface level. The songwriting and compositions here is utterly baffling. It's very experimental and progressive, but not in an avant-garde way. The emphasis is still very much on enjoyability here, but Magdalene integrates organs and synths and electronic dance beats and Middle Eastern scales and just all sorts of other unusual things into the music. And I feel like everything I've just said has made this album sound like it's a tremendously unrefined mess, but it's not. It's very cohesive and it's very enjoyable. It honestly takes a certain kind of person to even try to make this music, and then to pull it off is even more impressive. It's also possible that I'm totally nuts though, because we're out here in the realm of music that like only friends, family, and Feigner listen to. Like last I checked, this guy has 39 monthly listeners and I'm 2 of those. So yeah, I could be totally off my rocker here. If you're a like hardcore black metal fan, check this one out and let me know if it's any good. It's definitely strange and I definitely enjoyed it, but I'm also definitely strange, so. 2nd, we have Scarred with Scarred. These guys are one of the few bands toting the new European tech metal genre tags, but honestly, I think it's a little silly of a tag. I'm going to call it prog metal. This takes the new metal of Avatar and the progressiveness of Gojira and kind of blends them to make one of the most scatterbrained but tremendously accessible metal sounds out there. The guitar work on this album blew me away. Like the tones are generally like super clean nu metal tones, but that allows the simple but catchy riffs to stand out. Also, the vocalist initially comes off as a bit like a flat melodeath vocalist. However, his enunciation is fantastic, and his biggest selling point is really just that he has a very inoffensive sound. And then the songwriting is just strange. Songs will just start one place and end up somewhere totally different. Like Dance of the Giants starts off as a waltzy thing, briefly becomes an Avatar nu metal song in the middle, and then by the end is like a tremolo heavy post-rock song. And then the follow-up track, Petrichor, starts off as like a pop metal thing with a dance drum beat, and ends up as a modern rock post-metalcore song. So yeah, I think these guys just make good music. Like the metal aficionados will find something they've never heard before, and people who aren't particularly accustomed to metal will understand why it's enjoyable. And honestly, there's just not that many albums that do that. Okay, we are at the end here. Picking an album of the month is always difficult. It pretty much always turns out that I have a handful of albums that are all great in their own regard, and the question isn't so much which of them is better than the other, so much as what do I value as a fan. I basically need to make a judgment call about what the values of this channel are every time I pick a top album. So, you know, with all that in mind, my pick for this month is Anapest with Dark Arms Reach Skyward with Bone White Fingers. Anapest is the solo project of April Hutchins, and the album is themed around the popular anime Neon Genesis Evangelion. Features direct quotes from the show in the lyrics, as well as devoting one of the music videos to clips from the show. April is very open about how Evangelion helped her through a difficult period in her life where she was dealing with depression and also just kind of all those woes that go along with having a crappy office job and trying to survive on your own away from home for the first time. She also talks about how Evangelion helped her discover other artists whose work was inspired by the show, and how that led to a creative burst for her. I've watched the couple interviews she's done, and it's immediately apparent that she wears her heart on her sleeve, puts a lot of herself into her music, and openly invites you to join her in celebrating the things she's passionate about. And this has to be my album of the month, because ultimately it's what I want to see more of from the metal community. This album kind of can't be made by a metal band. It's so unusual and just progressive sonically that had a bassist or something been around to compromise the vision, the whole album would have fallen apart. Furthermore, if Anapest were a group, the album would have lost its personal connection to April. As it stands, this album is one girl paying homage to and celebrating an important part of her life and culture. And while many bands have managed to make concept albums, rarely have they felt as personally tied to the artist as this does. The irreplaceable thing about this album is simply the level of vulnerability and empathy that went into it. It sometimes irritates me how much musicians can forget to be artists. Like, engineering some catchy songs is great, but the truly sublime works come from musicians who can do that, but also infuse a piece of themselves along with it to create a brand. And personally, I'm very fond of April's brand. It's wholesome, it's fun, and it's about sharing things that you're passionate about. And ultimately, that's a very similar message to the one I'd like to spread with this channel. I think the music which really truly hits home is the music which you don't only enjoy the sound of, but you also feel like you're part of the community and culture surrounding it. And this was the only album this month out of literal hundreds that I could see a new community and fandom forming around. And as much as other artists managed to engineer some fantastic records, none of them stood out to me as being as personal as this one. But hey, you know, that's just me and my opinion. I had to absolutely churn through records this month, and so a lot of them didn't get the attention they deserve. So let me know if you connected with any albums on a really personal level, because I will absolutely give them another listen. Okay, that's all I've got. If you made it this far, I'd really appreciate if you could hit the like button. I'm a new channel, and people liking the video helps more people discover my content. But yeah, that's it. I'm done. Until next time, thanks for watching.